Ladies and gentlemen, we think about influence. We often imagine power, politics, or wealth. But influence is also woven silently into something far more subtle, what we wear. Clothing is not just fabric stitched together. It is identity, it is message, it is perception. And tonight, I want to take you into a world that fascinates millions around the globe. The wardrobe of Melania Trump. For years, people have asked the same question: how much does it really cost? But the truth is, it's not just about the price tag. It's about the story each piece tells, the power it holds, and the message it sends to the world. Behind every tailored jacket, every couture gown, and every carefully chosen ensemble lies a purpose far deeper than appearance. This is not simply about fashion. It's about symbolism, about diplomacy, and about how a First Lady of the United States used her wardrobe as a language the entire world could understand. And if you stay with me through this journey, you will discover that the value of Melania Trump's style goes beyond dollars and designer labels. It reveals lessons about influence, confidence, and legacy that can inspire each of us in our own lives. When Melania Trump stepped onto the world stage as First Lady, people quickly noticed something remarkable. Her words were few, her demeanor graceful, but her presence spoke volumes. And one of the most striking elements of that presence was her fashion. It wasn't simply about choosing beautiful clothing. It was about creating a language without words. Every gown, every suit, every pair of shoes became part of a statement, a deliberate choice meant to convey elegance, confidence, and authority. That is why her wardrobe became far more than personal preference. It became a powerful tool of influence. Think about it for a moment. In a room filled with world leaders, celebrities, and decision makers, the smallest details carry weight. A choice of color, a particular designer, even the tailoring of a jacket can shift how someone is perceived. Melania understood this with incredible precision. She knew that fashion was not trivial. Fashion was not a distraction. Fashion was a stage in itself. By embracing high fashion with consistency and composure, she sent a signal of strength to allies, to critics, and to millions watching around the globe. Take, for example, her appearances at international summits. When she wore a structured, impeccably tailored suit, she communicated authority. When she chose a flowing, regal gown, she represented grace and poise. Each look reflected not just her personal taste, but the role she embodied as First Lady of the United States. It was diplomacy through design, elegance as strategy. And that kind of intentionality does not happen by chance. It happens when someone truly understands the power of image. What makes this even more fascinating is the subtlety. She didn't need to stand behind a podium and raise her voice to make an impact. She didn't have to dominate conversations with speeches or statements. Instead, she let her presence do the talking. That quiet confidence, amplified by her wardrobe, made her unforgettable. It is often said that actions speak louder than words, but in her case, appearances spoke with equal force. And isn't that a lesson for all of us? Because while we may not wear gowns worth thousands of dollars or stand in the spotlight of global media, each of us carries an image every single day. The way we present ourselves to the world, our choices, our confidence, our posture, those elements send messages before we ever say a word. Melania's approach reminds us that presentation is not vanity. It is strategy. It is about aligning how we look with what we want to say and who we want to become. Now consider the psychology of perception. We live in a world where first impressions are made within seconds. People don't wait to know your character, your values, or your abilities before forming an opinion. When the average person struggles to pay bills, to make ends meet, to find stability in uncertain times, the sight of a gown worth tens of thousands of dollars can feel like an unnecessary reminder of inequality. For her critics, the question was simple. Should a public figure wear clothing so far removed from the reality of the people she represents? That perspective is rooted in fairness, in empathy, in the idea that leadership should reflect relatability. But there's another side to that conversation. Supporters would argue that her style elevated the role she held, that her appearance on the world stage represented America as a nation of influence, power, and success. They would say that her fashion choices were not a dismissal of the struggles of everyday people, but rather a celebration of the strength and prosperity that America stood for. In this light, her wardrobe became not a sign of detachment, but a symbol of aspiration. It showed that America could stand with elegance, that its first lady could rival the royalty and dignitaries she often encountered, and that the image projected outward mattered just as much as the policies discussed behind closed doors. What's fascinating is how clothing, something we all use daily, can provoke such intense debate when worn on a platform that magnifies every choice. It reminds us that fashion is never neutral. On an ordinary woman, a pair of designer shoes is just a personal indulgence. On the First Lady, it becomes a headline, a point of criticism, or a symbol of empowerment, depending on who's looking. That duality is the burden and the privilege of public life. Every choice becomes a mirror in which others reflect their own values, expectations, and frustrations. In truth, both sides of the debate are valid. Luxury can be inspiring, but it can also feel excessive. Glamour can uplift, but it can also distance. And navigating that delicate balance is one of the hardest challenges for any public figure. Melania faced it every day. Every outfit she wore, every designer she selected, had the power to spark admiration or ignite controversy, and she knew it. Which is why her ability to remain calm, composed, and consistent through it all is remarkable in itself. But let's look deeper at what this really means. When people criticized her for being too extravagant, what they were really questioning was the role of symbolism in leadership. Should leaders and those beside them reflect the realities of the people they represent? Or should they project an image of strength and prosperity, even if it feels unattainable? That's the real heart of the conversation. Her wardrobe became the stage on which this larger question was acted out again and again every time she appeared in public. And perhaps that is why her fashion choices will always remain a subject of debate. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths about our relationship with wealth, influence, and image. They push us to ask ourselves whether we prefer leaders who are relatable or leaders who are aspirational. They remind us that perception often matters just as much as reality, especially in the world of politics and global influence. Through it all, she never wavered. She never allowed the noise of criticism to dictate her choices. She wore what she believed reflected her role, her identity, and her position. And in that, she showed a certain resilience. Because it takes strength to carry luxury without apology, knowing that it will divide opinion. It takes confidence to walk into a room wearing something that will be dissected by the press, praised by some, condemned by others, and still stand tall as if none of it can shake your sense of self. And that confidence is perhaps the most powerful takeaway. Because whether people agreed with her choices or not, they paid attention, they looked, they noticed. And in the world of influence, that is one of the greatest measures of impact. To spark conversation, to inspire debate, to draw focus, that is what keeps someone unforgettable. So yes, her wardrobe stirred controversy. It provoked debate. It highlighted the divide between admiration and criticism. Quote. But in doing so, it also revealed something essential. That fashion at that level is never about clothing alone. It is about meaning, perception, and the way the world chooses to interpret a single image. And no matter which side of the argument people fall on, her choices made sure that silence was never one of the outcomes. And that is why her fashion, whether praised or condemned, always mattered. Long after the headlines fade and the critics move on to other stories, what remains is legacy. And for Melania Trump, her legacy is inseparable from her wardrobe. Her fashion choices, carefully curated over years in the public eye, have carved her place in history as one of the most stylish and enigmatic First Ladies America has ever seen. Whether one admired her or questioned her, no one could ignore her. And that in itself is a mark of lasting influence. Her style was never accidental. It was refined, deliberate, and consistent. She knew how to walk into a room and command attention without speaking a single word. That kind of presence is rare. It is not taught, it is cultivated over time with poise, discipline, and intention. And it was in those quiet but powerful moments, arriving at a state dinner in an elegant gown, stepping off a plane in a sharp suit, or appearing at a ceremony in a perfectly tailored coat, that her image was etched into the minds of millions. The clothes were beautiful, yes, but the way she carried them made them unforgettable. We often talk about influence in terms of speeches, policies, or groundbreaking achievements. But influence can also live in the realm of style. It lives in the way someone presents themselves, the aura they project, and the memory they leave behind. For Melania, her wardrobe was not just clothing. It was her signature. It became the visual language through which people all over the world came to know her, to whisper them. And that language will outlast the chatter of critics and the fleeting cycle of news. Think about the way history remembers iconic figures. Jackie Kennedy is remembered for her pillbox hats and timeless suits. Princess Diana for her elegance and compassion expressed even in her fashion choices. These women understood that what they wore wasn't just about beauty. It was about creating symbols that endured. Melania has secured her place in that same conversation. Her legacy is one of sophistication, of modern glamour, of a woman who never allowed herself to fade into the background. What makes her wardrobe so remarkable is not only the financial cost or the luxury labels attached to it, but the way it will continue to be studied and discussed. Designers, stylists, historians, and admirers will look back and analyze what she wore and what it meant. Each appearance, each gown, each bold fashion decision adds a layer to her story. And when people look back decades from now, they will see a woman who embraced her role with grace and left an imprint that went beyond politics. But here's something even more powerful. Her style carries lessons for all of us, even those who will never step foot in the kind of world she occupied. It reminds us that the way we present ourselves matters. It shows us that what we wear, how we carry ourselves, and the choices we make about our image are not superficial. They are extensions of our confidence, our values, and our presence in the world. Her legacy teaches us that image is not about perfection. It is about intentionality. It is about using what you have to express who you are and what you stand for. And perhaps this is why her fashion will always be more than just luxury. Because beneath the glamour, there was a lesson in resilience. She endured criticism, she carried the weight of scrutiny, and still she showed up, refined and composed every single time. She never let others dictate her identity, and in that choice, she created a legacy that is uniquely hers. That is the mark of someone who understands the long game, that today's headlines fade, but tomorrow's memory lasts. There will always be those who see her wardrobe only through the lens of wealth, and there will always be those who see it as elegance personified. But the truth lies in the fact that her style has already secured its place in history. Her choices will be remembered not only for what they cost, but for what they symbolized. They will be remembered as part of her story, as part of America's cultural memory, and as part of the conversation about what it means to use fashion as a form of power and presence. And that is why her wardrobe, more than anything else, was never just about the moment. It was about the legacy it would leave behind.